This is not a confession seeking forgiveness. I do not deserve forgiveness. This is a warning to anyone who practices root work or any other form of folk magic. To anyone who thinks they can control spirits, direct them, use them for personal gain. You cannot. The spirits have their own justice, their own rules. And if you try to pervert the work for selfish purposes, if you use your knowledge to harm or protect the guilty, they will turn on you. They will use your own hands against you. They will make you complicit in your own punishment. This happened 2 months ago. I am sharing this because I need someone to know what I did, what I helped do, what I covered up. My name is Estelle Grayson, and I practice root work. Some people call it hoodoo. Others call it conjure. I learned it from my grandmother, who learned it from hers, going back generations to when our family worked the tobacco fields in North Carolina. It is not a game. It is not pretend. It is a spiritual practice with real consequences. And 2 months ago, I took a client I should have refused. A girl who was already dead, and she made me help kill my own son. I need you to understand something before I continue. Root work is real. It has been practiced by Black and indigenous families in the American South for centuries. My grandmother worked roots in the Appalachian foothills. She was what they call a two-headed doctor, someone who can see both the physical and spiritual worlds, who can divine the future and influence the present through prayer, herbs, and ritual. She taught me young how to make mojo bags for protection, how to read signs in nature, how to call on the ancestors for guidance, and yes, how to lay tricks on people who needed to be taught lessons. I do not advertise. People find me through word of mouth. Someone tells someone else. A cousin in Tennessee mentions my name to a friend in Georgia. Eventually, someone shows up at my door. They come for love work mostly. Want someone to notice them. Want a straying partner to come home. But sometimes they come for darker purposes. Revenge work. Crossing spells. Justice work for situations where the law has failed them. I do not judge. My grandmother taught me that root work is about balance, about setting things right. If someone has been wronged and the courts will not help, then maybe the spirits will. That is the philosophy. I charged based on the work required. Simple candle dressing, $50. Complex ritual work involving multiple components, $500 or more. I made enough to supplement my disability income. Lived quietly in a trailer on 20 acres outside Peakville, Tennessee. Had my herb garden, my altar room, my privacy. No one bothered me, and I bothered no one, until the girl showed up. It was a Tuesday night in October. Raining hard. The kind of cold mountain rain that seeps into everything. I heard the knock around 10 p.m. Unusual. Most clients called first. Made appointments. But sometimes desperate people just showed up. I opened the door. She was soaked. Long dark hair plastered to her face. Wearing jeans and a floral print blouse. Shivering. Barefoot. I asked if she was okay. She needed to call someone. A ride. Help. She just stared at me with these dark, empty eyes and said, I need the suffocation curse. For 4 people. I will pay whatever you ask. I should have closed the door. Should have recognized the wrongness. But I did not. Because I am proud. And I am greedy. And I had rent due. I let her in. Told her to sit. Made her tea. She did not touch it. Just sat there dripping on my floor. Water pooling around her bare feet. I asked who the 4 people were. She gave me 3 names. Dale Grayson. Vincent Porter. Troy Marsh. And then she said, the 4th is you. You will know when the time comes. Dale Grayson is my son. 34 years old. Lives in Knoxville. Works, construction. Vincent and Troy were his friends from high school. I had known all three boys their entire lives. I asked the girl why she wanted to curse them, what they had done. She looked at me and said, "They killed me. Pushed my car into the quarry on your property. You watched from your kitchen window, and you did nothing." My blood went cold. Because she was right. 6 months earlier, late April, I had heard shouting from the old quarry on the back edge of my land. Looked out the kitchen window with my binoculars. Saw Dale's truck. Saw 3 men pushing a small sedan toward the edge. Saw it go over. Heard the splash. Watched them stand there for a moment, then drive away. I did not call the police. Because Dale is my only child. Because I have already lost his father. Because I could not bear to lose him too. I convinced myself maybe the car was empty. Maybe it was just them disposing of a junk vehicle. Maybe no one was hurt. I lied to myself. And I never mentioned it. Never asked Dale what happened that night. Just pretended I had seen nothing. The girl sat across from me, water still dripping from her hair, and said, "You know what happened. You know I was in that car. You know they murdered me. And you protected them. So now I am here. For justice. Will you help me? Or will I take what I need by force?" I tried to tell her I could not curse my own son. That root work has rules. You do not work against your own blood. She smiled, cold, empty, and said, "You already broke the rules when you watched me die and said nothing. When you chose your son over truth, over justice, over me. Now you will help me finish this, or you will suffer worse than he will." I do not know why I agreed. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Maybe the spirits were already guiding my hands. But I went to my workroom, started gathering materials. The suffocation curse is old. Requires a doll baby for each target. Burlap is traditional. Stuffed with graveyard dirt, crushed mullein leaf, and a personal item from the target. You drive nails into the doll's chest and throat while speaking the curse, calling on the spirits to steal the target's breath, to make them die like drowning on dry land. I made 3 dolls. For Dale, I used a patch from one of his old work shirts. For Vincent, a button from a jacket he left at my house years ago. For Troy, a shoelace from a pair of boots. The 4th doll, the girl said to use fabric from my own dress. The floral print one I wear on Sundays. I cut a square from the hem, sewed it into the burlap, stuffed the doll. The girl watched, did not speak, just sat there with those empty eyes. When the dolls were ready, she stood, took the hammer from my work table. I started to say the words of the curse. She shook her head, said, "No, I will do this part. You just watch, like you watched before." She drove the first nail into Dale's doll, directly over the heart. I felt something cold wash through the room, heard a sound like wind through the trees. She drove another nail into the throat, then another, and another. By the 4th nail, my phone rang. It was Dale's girlfriend, screaming, saying something was wrong, that Dale could not breathe, that he was turning blue, that the ambulance was coming, but he was not responding. I tried to grab the doll, to pull the nails out. The girl pushed me back with impossible strength. Finished the curse. Dale's girlfriend kept screaming in my ear. Then the line went dead. The girl moved to Vincent's doll. Same process. 4 nails. While she worked, my phone buzzed. Text from Vincent's wife. Emergency. Hospital. Cannot breathe. Please pray. Then Troy's doll. Same. Text from his mother. Troy collapsed. Unresponsive. Paramedics could not revive him. I was sobbing by then, begging her to stop. She ignored me. Finished Troy's doll. Sat the hammer down, looked at me, and said, "Now you understand what it feels like to watch someone you love die and do nothing." She picked up the fourth doll, the one with my dress fabric, handed me the hammer, said, "You will do this one yourself, for what you allowed to happen, for the choice you made, for the silence you kept." I refused. Threw the hammer across the room. She picked it up, placed it back in my hand, and her hand was cold. So cold it burned. She said, "You do not have a choice." Just like I did not have a choice when they pushed me into the water, when I screamed and they laughed, when I drowned alone in the dark. You will do this, and you will know what justice feels like. My hand moved without my permission, like something else was controlling it. I watched myself drive the first nail into the doll's chest, felt pressure in my own chest, like a weight pushing down. Drove the second nail into the throat. My airway tightened. I could not swallow, could not breathe properly. Tried to drop the hammer, could not. My hand kept moving. Third nail, fourth nail. By the fifth nail, I was on the floor, gasping, drowning in air. My vision dimmed. I looked up. The girl was standing over me, no longer dripping, no longer cold. She looked peaceful, whole. She said, "Thank you. Now, it is finished." I woke up 12 hours later, paramedics standing over me. Someone had called 911. Anonymous tip about a woman in distress at my address. The paramedics said I had experienced some kind of respiratory event, that my oxygen levels had been critically low, that I was lucky to be alive. They took me to the hospital, kept me for observation. While I was there, I learned the rest. Dale had died. Respiratory failure. No medical explanation. Vincent died. Same cause. Troy died. Same. 3 young men, all healthy, all died within hours of each other. All from sudden, unexplained suffocation. The doctors called it a bizarre coincidence. Possibly environmental. Maybe carbon monoxide, poisoning from a shared source. But they found no evidence. No toxins. No explanation. I was released 3 days later. Went home. Found my workroom exactly as I had left it. 4 burlap dolls on the table. 5 nails in each one, including mine. I tried to remove them. Tried to burn the dolls. Tried to undo what had been done. Nothing worked. The nails would not budge. The burlap would not burn. I consulted other root workers. Told them what happened. Most did not believe me. Said it was grief and guilt making me imagine things. But one old woman in Alabama said she had heard stories like mine. Said sometimes the dead come back for justice. That when someone dies wrongly and the living fail to speak up, the spirits take matters into their own hands. She said there was no undoing what had been done. That the curse was complete. That the only thing I could do was live with what I had helped create. I have been living with it for 2 months now. I can still breathe. Barely. My lungs feel heavy all the time, like I am breathing through water. Doctors say it is anxiety, trauma response. But I know better. I know it is the 5th nail. The one I drove into my own doll. The one that keeps me alive, but suffering. The one that reminds me every day what I did. What I covered up. What I allowed. Dale is dead. Vincent is dead. Troy is dead. 3 men who killed a girl and threw her body in a quarry. 3 men who would have never faced justice because I chose to protect my son instead of speaking truth. And now, I am dying too. Slowly. Suffocating a little more each day. Living long enough to understand what I did wrong. Long enough to carry the weight of it. I looked up the missing person reports after it happened. Found her. Lydia Chen. 19 years old. College student. Disappeared in April. Car went off the road near Peakville. Police assumed she lost control. Searched the area. Never found the vehicle. Never found her body. Case went cold. Family still looking. Still hoping. I could tell them where she is. Could give them closure. But then I would have to explain how I know. Would have to admit I watched it happen. Would have to face criminal charges for obstruction. For accessory after the fact. So, I stay silent. Just like I stayed silent 6 months ago. I am dying. The doctors say it is COPD. Progressive lung disease. They do not understand why it developed so quickly. So severely. I do. Because I have 5 nails and a burlap doll on my altar. 5 nails I cannot remove. 5 nails that represent the choice I made. To protect my son instead of speaking for the dead. To keep my family intact instead of demanding justice. To save myself instead of doing what was right. Lydia Chen deserved better. Her family deserves answers. The law deserves truth. But I will die before I give it to them. Because I am a coward. Because even now, even knowing what happened, even suffering every day, I cannot bring myself to destroy what is left of my son's reputation. Cannot admit publicly what he did. Cannot face the consequences of my silence. If you are reading this, if you practice any kind of spiritual work, learn from my mistake. Do not think you can choose sides. Do not think you can hide truth to protect someone you love. The spirits see everything, and they demand balance. They demand justice, and if you stand in the way of it, they will move you, by force if necessary. I wake up every night, gasping, feeling like I am underwater, feeling the weight on my chest, hearing Lydia's voice, watching those empty eyes, knowing that I helped her get justice, but only because she forced me to. Not because I chose it, not because it was right, but because I had no other choice. And that makes me just as guilty as Dale, just as responsible for her death. Because I could have saved her, could have called the police that night, could have spoken up, but I did not. So, now I drown. Every day, a little more, until the 5th nail finally does its work, until I suffocate completely, until I face whatever judgment waits for women who watch girls die and say nothing, who protect murderers because they share blood, who choose family over justice, over truth, over everything. This is my testimony. This is my warning. And this is my punishment. I am writing this from the bedroom, using Philip's laptop while he is downstairs with the family. I do not know if this will ever reach anyone. The internet is slow here, unreliable. But I am sending this to everyone I know, begging them to come, to get me out, to call the police, to do something. Because I do not know how much longer I can hold out. How much longer before the tree takes what it wants. Before I become another ornament hanging from the branches. Another piece of the family archive. Another Fairchild bound to this house. This tree. This nightmare. This happened last December. I am sharing this because I need someone outside this family, to know what goes on in that house, what I discovered, what they made me witness, what I fear I will become. My name is Louise Carter, and I visited my fiancé's family home for the first time last Christmas. Philip Fairchild had always been evasive about his family. In 2 years of dating, I had never met them. He said they were private, traditional, that they did not approve of bringing outsiders into family matters until an engagement was official. I understood, respected his boundaries. But when he proposed in November and invited me to spend Christmas at Fairchild Hall, I was nervous but excited. I thought I would finally understand the family I was marrying into. I was right, but I wish I had never learned the truth. Fairchild Hall is in rural Vermont. 50 acres of isolated property. The house itself is a 3-story colonial mansion built in 1792. Philip told me it had been in the family for 9 generations. That every Fairchild since the original builder had lived and died in that house. He said it with pride. I thought it was charming. A sense of continuity. Legacy. I did not understand what that legacy required. We arrived on December 23rd. The house was beautiful from the outside. White columns. Black shutters. Snow covering the grounds like a Christmas card. But when we entered, I noticed something immediately. The house was wrong. Not architecturally, not structurally, but spatially. The central hallway should have continued straight to the back of the house. Instead, it wrapped around something, a massive obstruction in the center of the building. And as we moved deeper inside, I realized what it was. An oak tree, growing through the house, from basement to roof. Enormous, ancient, its trunk easily 15 feet in diameter, branches spreading through every floor. Philip saw my expression, said it was a family feature, that the house had been built around the tree deliberately, that his ancestor, the original builder, had believed the oak was sacred, that it protected the family, that every generation maintained it. I asked if it was safe, if a tree growing through a house did not create structural problems. He laughed, said the tree was the structure, that it held the house together. I did not know how to respond. So I smiled, nodded, told myself it was eccentric but harmless. Philip's mother, Marjorie Fairchild, greeted us in the main room. She was in her 60s. Thin, severe features, cold blue eyes. She looked at me like I was something she was evaluating for purchase. Asked about my family, my education, my health, particularly my health, whether I had any chronic conditions, whether I planned to have children. The questions felt invasive. But I answered politely, tried to make a good impression. She listened, said nothing, then turned to Philip and said, "She will do." I felt like I had passed an inspection, not been welcomed, evaluated, approved, like livestock. Philip's father, Edward, was quieter, kept to himself in the library. I met him briefly. He shook my hand. His grip was weak, clammy. He looked tired, worn, like something had been slowly draining him for years. Philip's younger sister, Claire, was 26. She seemed nervous, anxious. When I tried to talk to her alone, she kept glancing toward Marjorie, would not speak freely, just smiled, nodded, agreed with everything her mother said. The first 2 days were unremarkable. We decorated for Christmas, cooked meals together, walked the grounds. But I kept noticing small things. The way Philip and Claire deferred to Marjorie on every decision. The way Edward barely spoke unless she gave him permission. The way all of them treated the tree with a strange reverence. Would touch it as they passed. Whisper to it. I asked Philip if it was a family superstition. He said it was tradition, that the tree was important, that I would understand soon. On Christmas Eve, Marjorie announced we would decorate the tree. I assumed she meant a Christmas tree. She did not. She meant the oak, the one growing through the house. I followed them to the main room. The tree's branches spread across the ceiling, and hanging from those branches were hundreds of ornaments. Not typical ornaments. These were small glass vials, sealed, each containing something. I moved closer, looked at one. It held a lock of hair tied with string. I looked at another, a baby tooth, another, a fingernail, another, a small piece of what looked like bone. I stepped back, asked what they were. Marjorie smiled. Cold, empty, said they were the family. Every Fairchild who had ever lived in the house. Preserved, bound to the tree, to the land, to each other. She said it kept the family strong, united. That as long as we gave pieces of ourselves to the tree would give us longevity, prosperity, protection. She said the original Fairchild had made a pact with the tree, that it would sustain the family, keep them healthy, keep them together, but only if the family fed it. I asked what she meant by fed it. She did not answer directly, just gestured to the ornaments. Said every family member had to contribute. Hair from their first haircut, baby teeth when they fell out, nail clippings throughout childhood, blood during adolescence, wisdom teeth when extracted, and finally, bone, a small fragment taken from the body after death, before burial, to complete the binding, to ensure that even in death, the Fairchild remained part of the tree, part of the family. I looked at Philip. He would not meet my eyes. I asked if he was serious, if this was real. He said it was tradition, that he had grown up with it, that all Fairchilds had, that it was not harmful, just symbolic, a way to honor the family, to maintain continuity. I said it was disturbing, that keeping human remains in ornaments was not normal. Marjorie's expression hardened. She said, normal is irrelevant. This is Fairchild, and if you marry Philip, you will become Fairchild, and you will participate. I told her I needed air, walked out of the room, went upstairs, sat on the bed trying to process what I had just heard. This was not eccentric. This was disturbed. A family that kept biological samples of its members in glass vials hanging from a tree. That believed the tree needed to be fed. That required participation from everyone, including spouses, including me. I decided to leave, packed my bag, went downstairs. The front door was unlocked. I opened it, stepped onto the porch, and then something happened. My nose started bleeding. Heavily, I felt dizzy, disoriented, like the air pressure had changed suddenly. I stumbled, fell against the railing. The bleeding would not stop. I went back inside, sat down. The bleeding slowed, stopped completely. I tried again, opened the door, stepped out. Same thing. Nosebleed. Dizziness. I could not leave. Philip found me, helped me clean up. I asked what was happening. He said the tree did not want me to go, that I had been marked, that Marjorie had added my name to the family records the moment I arrived, that the tree recognized me now as Fairchild, and Fairchilds did not leave. I told him that was insane, that trees do not control people, that I was calling the police. He said I could try, that the phone would not work. That my cell had no signal here, that the property was isolated, that no one would come, that I was here until the tree decided otherwise. I checked my phone. He was right. No signal. I tried the landline. Dead. I was trapped. In a house with a family that believed a tree controlled them, that fed it pieces of themselves, that had marked me as one of their own, and I could not leave. That night, I did not sleep. Sat in the bedroom listening. Around 3 a.m. I heard something. Movement downstairs. I crept to the hallway. Looked over the railing. Marjorie stood in front of the tree. Alone. Speaking to it. I could not hear the words. But the way she moved. The way she touched the bark. It was not reverence. It was fear. Submission. Like she was asking permission for something. Or begging forgiveness. Christmas morning, Marjorie announced the ceremony. Said it was time to add this year's ornaments. Philip, Edward, and Claire would each contribute. I watched as they brought out small glass vials. Pre-prepared. Philip's contained a wisdom tooth. He had it extracted 2 months earlier. Said it was for dental reasons. I realized now it was for this. For the tree. Edward's vial contained blood. A vial full of it. Drawn recently. He looked pale. Weak. Like he had given too much. Claire's vial contained hair. A long braid. Cut from her head that morning. I watched as they each hung their ornaments on the tree. Whispered words I could not hear. The tree seemed to react. Not visibly. But I felt something shift in the room. A pressure. A presence. Marjorie turned to me. Said it was my turn. That to join the family I had to give the tree something. She held out a vial. A pair of scissors. Said I could start with hair. That it was easy. Painless. That every Fairchild wife had done this. That it was expected. Required. Non-negotiable. I refused. Said I was not part of this. That I was leaving. That Philip needed to take me to town. Now. Marjorie smiled. That same cold, empty smile. Said I could refuse. But the tree would not let me leave. That I would stay in this house until I participated. That resistance was pointless. That I should accept my place. I looked at Philip. Begged him to help me. To tell his mother this was insane. To drive me home. He looked away. Said it was just hair. That it would grow back. That if I loved him, I would do this. That it was important to his family. To our future. I asked if he hurt himself. If he understood how disturbed this was. He said I did not understand. That the tree kept the family safe. Healthy. Prosperous. That every Fairchild lived long lives. No cancer. No heart disease. No accidents. Because the tree protected them. But only if they fed it. Only if they gave pieces of themselves willingly. I asked what happened if they did not. He went pale. Said we do not talk about that. I pressed. Said I needed to know. He finally admitted that family members who refused to participate became ill. Slowly. Their health deteriorated. They weakened. And eventually, they died. But it took years. Painful years. And in the end, the tree took them anyway. Took pieces after death. Because the binding could not be broken. Once you were marked as Fairchild, you belonged to the tree. Living or dead. I realized then what Edward's exhaustion was. What Claire's anxiety was. They were not giving to the tree willingly. They were being drained. Slowly. Continually. Marjorie controlled when and how much they gave. And she took more than necessary. Kept them weak. Kept them compliant. kept them trapped. And Philip was part of it. He brought me here knowing this would happen, knowing I would be trapped, marked, forced to participate, because he wanted someone else to share the burden, someone else to feed the tree, so he would not have to give as much. I told him I would never forgive him. He said I would understand eventually, that everyone did, that the tree was patient, that I would either participate willingly or be forced. But either way, I would give, because that was what Fairchilds did. That was what the family required. That was the price of belonging. It has been 3 weeks since Christmas. I am still at Fairchild Hall. I have tried to leave multiple times. Every attempt ends the same. Nosebleeds, dizziness. Once, I made it to the property line, collapsed, woke up in the house, in bed, with Marjorie sitting beside me. She said the tree had brought me back, that I belonged here now. That resistance was harmful, that I should accept my place and spare myself the pain. I have not given the tree anything yet, but I am weakening, losing weight, feeling tired constantly. My hair has started falling out in clumps, not from stress, from something else, something drawing nutrients from my body, something pulling at me. Marjorie says it is the tree, taking what I will not give freely, that it would be easier if I just participated, just gave a little, just accepted the binding. But I cannot, because I know that once I give something, once I hang that first ornament, I will never leave. I will be part of this family, part of this house, part of this tree, forever. Philip apologized yesterday, said he thought I would understand, that I would see the benefits, the long life, the prosperity, the protection, that I would value those things more than freedom, more than choice. I asked him if he even heard himself, if he understood what he was describing. He said I was being dramatic, that this was family, that all families had expectations, traditions, obligations, that this was no different, just more visible. I told him this was a cult, that his family operated like a cult, that they isolated members, controlled information, punished dissent, demanded absolute loyalty, used fear and obligation to maintain compliance, that the tree was not protecting them. It was controlling them, and Marjorie was using that control to keep everyone trapped, weak, dependent. He got angry, said I did not understand, that I was an outsider, that I was judging something sacred, something I had not earned the right to criticize. I realized then that he was lost, that whatever the tree was, whatever this family had become, Philip was fully indoctrinated. He believed, completely, and he expected me to believe too, to submit, to accept, to become like them. And the worst part is, I do not know if I have a choice, because the tree will not let me leave. And every day I stay, I get weaker. And eventually, I will be too weak to resist. And Marjorie will take what she wants. Will hang my hair on the tree. Will mark me as Fairchild permanently. Will ensure I never escape. If you are reading this, please, do not ignore it. Do not dismiss it as a joke or a creative writing exercise. This is real. This is happening. There is a family in rural Vermont that keeps human remains in glass ornaments on a tree growing through their house. That believes the tree controls them. That forces new members to participate. That traps people who try to leave. And I am one of those people. And I do not know if I will ever get out. My name is Louise Carter. I was supposed to marry Philip Fairchild. I was supposed to become part of his family. I did not know what that meant. I did not know what they would do to me, what they would take from me, what I would become. And now I am trapped in Fairchild Hall, with a tree that breathes, with a family that feeds it, with a future I do not want, but cannot escape. Please, help me. I am Jillian Frost. I am 34 years old. I am a marketing consultant. I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. I bake bread every Sunday. And I am the keeper of every terrible secret in Santa Paula. Just like my grandmother before me. Just like my niece will be after me. The chest has chosen. The cycle continues. And there is nothing I can do to stop it. This happened 3 months ago. I am sharing this because I need someone to know what I found. What I learned about my family. About my town. About myself. My name is Jillian Frost, and I inherited an antique hope chest from my grandmother, Agatha Dutton. She died at 92 years old in her home in Santa Paula, California. Everyone said she lived a quiet life, that she was kind, that she baked cookies for the neighbors and volunteered at the church. They were wrong about everything. The hope chest arrived 2 weeks after the funeral. Dark wood. Ornate carvings. Heavy brass hinges. It came with a handwritten note in my grandmother's shaky script. For Jillian, open when you are ready to understand. I was not ready. I put the chest in my spare room and tried to forget about it. But I could not. Because every night I heard sounds coming from that room. Creaking. Like wood expanding. Breathing. Like something alive was inside. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood adjusting to temperature changes. But I knew better. I opened the chest on a Sunday morning. Inside, I found letters. Hundreds of letters. Organized by decade. Tied with ribbon. Dated from 1947 to 2023. The most recent was written 3 days before my grandmother died. I started reading, and I wish I had not. Because what I discovered destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family, about Santa Paula, about the woman who raised me after my mother died. The first letters were from 1947. My grandmother was 20 years old, working as a secretary for the Santa Paula city government. The letters were correspondence between her and a man named Edwin Hale, local attorney, prominent family. They were not romantic. They were transactional, detailing a business arrangement. Edwin had information about the mayor's son. A hit-and-run accident. A young woman killed. The mayor paid Edwin to make the evidence disappear, to ensure the police report was filed incorrectly, to guarantee no charges were filed. Edwin documented everything, and my grandmother kept the records. That was the beginning. Over the next decade, the letters showed a pattern. Edwin would discover crimes committed by Santa Paula's elite. Murders, disappearances, assaults, financial fraud. Things that should have resulted in arrests and trials. Instead, Edwin would approach the families, offer to help, to make evidence disappear, to ensure witnesses stayed silent, and in exchange, the families would pay. Not just money, loyalty, favors, access. They became indebted, and my grandmother kept the records. Every transaction. Every crime, every person who owed them. By 1960, my grandmother had transitioned from secretary to partner. The letters showed her actively participating in the cover-ups, intimidating witnesses, bribing police officers, destroying evidence. She was good at it. Better than Edwin. She understood people, knew their fears, knew how to apply pressure. The letters detailed conversations where she convinced a mother not to report her daughter's murder, where she threatened a police officer's family to ensure he falsified a report, where she helped bury a child who had been killed by a prominent businessman's son. All documented, all preserved, all kept in the chest. The scope was staggering. Over 70 years, my grandmother and Edwin built a network that controlled Santa Paula. Mayors, police chiefs, judges, business owners, doctors, everyone who mattered was either complicit or indebted. And the crimes they covered ranged from traffic violations to serial murder. It did not matter. If you had money and connections, my grandmother could make your problems disappear. For a price. But the worst letters were the ones about my family. About my father. About my mother. About me. In 1994, my father, Thomas Frost, hit a child with his car. The child was riding a bicycle near the elementary school. My father was drunk, going 50 in a 25 zone. The impact killed the child instantly. My father did not stop. He drove home, called my grandmother. She called Edwin. By the time police arrived at the scene, witnesses had been convinced they saw a different vehicle. The license plate number they reported belonged to a car that had been stolen 2 weeks prior. Security camera footage from a nearby business was erased. The investigation went cold. The child's family never got justice. And my father never faced charges. I was 8 years old when that happened. I remember my father coming home that night. Remember him crying. Remember my mother asking what was wrong. I did not understand then. But reading the letters, I understood perfectly. My mother found out. She confronted my father, threatened to go to the police. My grandmother intervened. Tried to convince her to stay quiet, offered money, offered protection. My mother refused, said she could not live with the knowledge that the child's family deserved the truth. My mother died 3 months later. The official cause of death was listed as suicide, overdose of sleeping pills. But the letters told a different story. My father killed her, made it look like suicide. Edwin helped stage the scene. My grandmother provided the alibi. And I, 10 years old, traumatized and confused, believed what they told me. That my mother had been depressed. That she had taken her own life. That it was not anyone's fault. I stopped reading. Put the letters down. Tried to process what I had learned. My grandmother was a monster. My father was a murderer. And I had been lied to my entire life. I wanted to destroy the letters, to burn them, to erase the evidence, and pretend I had never found it. I reached for the chest to close it, and that is when I noticed something wrong. The chest was bigger, not significantly, just a few inches taller than when I had opened it. I measured it against the marks it had left on the carpet. Confirmed what I was seeing. The chest had grown. I backed away, told myself I was imagining it, that stress and shock were affecting my perception. But when I returned an hour later, the chest was bigger still, noticeably larger. The wood seemed to pulse, like breathing, like something alive. I tried to move it, could not. It was too heavy. Far heavier than it should be. I tried to empty it, take out the letters and destroy them elsewhere. But when I reached in, my hand would not close around the paper, like trying to grip water. The letters were there, visible, but intangible, as if the chest would not let me remove them. That night, I heard my grandmother's voice. Not a hallucination. Not a memory. Her actual voice. Coming from the chest. Soft. Calm. Familiar. Jillian, you need to read the rest. You need to understand what this is. What you inherited. I tried to ignore it. Covered the chest with blankets. Left the room. Locked the door. But the voice followed me. Into the hallway. Into my bedroom. Jillian, you cannot run from this. It is yours now. Just as it was mine. Just as it will be your niece's someday. The cycle continues. You know it does. I read the remaining letters over the next week. Dozens more crimes. Dozens more families indebted. And then, the final letter. Written 3 days before my grandmother died. Addressed to me. It explained everything. The chest was not just a container. It was a record. A living archive. Every secret it held gave it power. And that power bound the keeper. My grandmother had tried to destroy it once. In the 1970s. After Edwin died, she thought she could walk away. Burn the letters. Live a normal life. But the chest would not let her. It grew. Expanded. Filled her house. Made it impossible to ignore. And when she tried to burn the letters, they would not catch fire. Would not tear. Would not be destroyed. She was stuck. Forced to continue the work. To keep collecting secrets. To keep the network intact. For another 50 years. And now, it was my turn. The letter explained that I had 3 choices. I could try to resist. Refuse to participate. In which case the chest would continue growing. Would take over my home. My life. Would make existence unbearable until I surrendered. I could try to destroy it. Burn the house down. Walk away. But the chest would survive. Would find me. Would follow. No matter where I went. Or I could accept the role. Become the new keeper. Continue the work my grandmother had started. Maintain the network. Keep the secrets. And in exchange, the chest would stay quiet. Would remain manageable. Would let me live. The letter ended with an apology. My grandmother said she was sorry. That she never wanted this for me. That she had hoped to find another way. But there was no other way. The chest chose its keepers. And I had been chosen. She said I would understand eventually. That the power was intoxicating. That knowing everyone's secrets, controlling everyone's fate, would become addicting. That I would learn to enjoy it. Just as she had. I did not believe her. I tried to resist. Stopped opening the chest. Stopped reading the letters. But the chest continued growing. Within 2 weeks it filled the spare room completely. Floor to ceiling. Wall to wall. Just wood and brass, and that constant breathing sound. I could not use the room anymore. Could not even open the door. And then it started expanding into the hallway. Pushing against the walls. Cracking the foundation. My neighbors asked what the noise was. I had no answer. I contacted a contractor. Asked about removing the chest. He looked at it and said it was built into the structure. That removing it would require tearing down the house. I asked him to do it. He quoted me $200,000. Money I did not have. I considered walking away. Letting the bank foreclose. Starting over somewhere else. But every time I tried to leave, I felt compelled to return. Like the chest was pulling me back. Like I was tethered to it. After 3 weeks, I surrendered. I opened the chest. Read the final letters. Instructions on how to continue the work. Lists of people in Santa Paula who were indebted. what crimes they had committed, what leverage existed, who to contact, how to apply pressure. It was all there, documented, organized, waiting for me. The first person I contacted was Mayor Richard Vance. His file showed that in 2015, his daughter had killed her college roommate. Accidental drug overdose during a party. Edwin had helped dispose of the body, had convinced the roommate's family the girl had run away. The case was never investigated. And now Mayor Vance of the network owed me. I called him, used the same phrases my grandmother had written in her letters. "Mr. Mayor, I am calling about an old family matter. I believe you knew my grandmother, Agatha Dutton." There was silence on the line. Then, a slow exhale. He said, "I wondered when you would call." I explained what I needed. A permit that had been denied for a housing development project. Something that would benefit me financially. Nothing too large. Just a test. To see if it still worked. He agreed immediately. Said the permit would be approved by the end of the week. No questions asked. I thanked him. Ended the call. And felt something I had not expected. Satisfaction. Power. The permit was approved 3 days later. I made another call. Police Chief David Morrison. His file showed he had covered up evidence in a domestic violence case in 2008. His son had assaulted his girlfriend, put her in the hospital. Edwin had convinced the girlfriend to recant her statement, had paid her medical bills, had ensured the son faced no charges. Now Chief Morrison owed me. I called with a different request. Speeding ticket dismissal. Something small. He complied. No hesitation. Over the next month, I made 7 calls. 7 favors. Small things at first. Then larger. A business competitor who needed licensing delays. A court case that needed a favorable judge. An investigation that needed to disappear. Every request was granted. Every person complied. Because they had no choice. Because my grandmother, and Edwin before her, had ensured their loyalty. And now that loyalty belonged to me. The chest stopped growing. Returned to its original size. The breathing sound quieted. My grandmother had been right. Acceptance was the key. Surrender was the solution. And the power, the control, the knowledge that I could influence everyone and everything in Santa Paula was intoxicating. I understood why she had done this for 70 years. Why she had never walked away. It was not just about the chest. It was about what the chest represented. Ultimate leverage. Absolute power. No consequences. But there was one final task. One last instruction in my grandmother's letter. I needed to ensure succession. The chest required a keeper. And when I could no longer fulfill the role, someone else would need to take my place. My grandmother suggested my niece, Emily. She's 7 years old. My brother's daughter. Innocent. Kind. Exactly the kind of person who should never be involved in this. But that was the point. The chest chose keepers based on bloodline. And Emily was next in line. I wrote a letter, addressed to Emily, to be given to her when I die, explaining what the chest is, what she will inherit, what she will be forced to become. I placed the letter in the chest, watched it disappear into the mass of documents, become part of the archive, part of the record, and I understood. This was not just about keeping secrets. It was about creating them, perpetuating them, ensuring that every generation would be complicit, would be trapped, would have no choice but to continue. I am sharing this because I need someone outside Santa Paula to know, to understand what happens in small towns where corruption runs deep, where families maintain power across generations, where secrets are currency and leverage is inherited. My grandmother built an empire, not of money or property, but of silence. And I am its new queen. I do not know if I can stop this. I do not know if I want to. The power is seductive. Control is overwhelming. And every time I make a call, every time someone complies with my requests, I feel the same thing my grandmother must have felt. Invincibility. I know it is wrong. I know the people who owe me committed terrible crimes, that they deserve justice, that their victims deserve truth. But I also know that exposing them would destroy me, would reveal my family's complicity, would show that I am continuing the work, would prove that I am just as guilty as they are. So, the secrets stay buried. The chest keeps growing its collection, and I keep making calls, applying pressure, collecting new debts, building new leverage, just as my grandmother did, just as Edwin did before her, just as Emily will do after me. The cycle continues. The network expands, and Santa Paula remains a town where justice is negotiable, where truth is flexible, where the right connections can erase anything. If you live in a small town, pay attention. Notice who has power. Notice who gets away with things. Notice whose crimes are never investigated, because in towns like Santa Paula, there is always someone keeping the records. Always someone maintaining the network. Always someone with a chest full of letters documenting every secret. And if you cross them, if you threaten to expose them, you will learn what happens when you challenge 70 years of accumulated leverage. This is my confession. This is my warning. And this is my legacy.
Let's just listen down.
If you are considering intensive shadow work, please listen to me. Find a licensed Jungian analyst. Work slowly. Build a relationship with a trained professional who understands the dangers. Do not trust anyone who promises rapid transformation. Do not trust anyone who uses substances to accelerate the process. Do not trust anyone who isolates you and rushes integration. Because the shadow is real. And if you open that door too quickly, without proper preparation, without proper support, something might come through that will not go back. The shadow is part of us. Jung was right about that. But he was also right that integration must be done carefully. With time. With support. With respect for the dangers. Because the shadow is not just repressed anger or hidden desires. It is something older. Something that exists in the collective unconscious. An archetype that predates individual consciousness. And if you give it an opening, if you weaken the barriers that keep it contained, it will emerge. And once it does, you cannot put it back. This happened in the fall of 2022. I am sharing this because I need people to understand that not all therapy is safe. That there are practitioners who claim to help you find yourself but, instead, unlock things that should never be touched. My name is Emma Clark, and I spent 6 days at a Jungian shadow work retreat in upstate New York. 5 of us went in. Only 3 of us came out. And none of us are the same people who entered. I need you to understand something before I continue. Carl Jung believed that within every person exists a shadow self. The parts of ourselves we have rejected, suppressed, denied. Our fears, our rage, our shame, the desires we cannot admit even to ourselves. Jung taught that to become whole, we must confront this shadow, integrate it, bring it into consciousness. But he also warned that this process was dangerous, that it required years of careful analysis with a trained therapist, that rushing the integration could lead to what he called shadow possession. a state where the repressed aspects overwhelm the conscious mind and take control. Dr. Helena Voss did not believe in going slowly. I found the retreat through an online forum for people interested in Jungian psychology. The post was simple: 6-day intensive shadow work immersion. Small group, maximum 8 participants. Facilitated by Dr. Helena Voss, Jungian analyst, 20 years experience. The goal: complete integration of the shadow self. The promise: transformation beyond anything traditional therapy could offer. The warning: this work is not for the faint of heart. I should have paid more attention to that warning. I was 31 years old and felt like I was living someone else's life. Good job in marketing. Nice apartment. Boyfriend I did not love, but could not bring myself to leave. I smiled at the right times, said the right things, played the role everyone expected. But beneath it all was a screaming emptiness, a sense that the real me, whoever that was, had been buried so deep I could not remember what she looked like. I had tried traditional therapy, medications, meditation retreats. Nothing worked. So, when I saw Dr. Voss's post, something inside me responded. Maybe, I thought. This is what I have been looking for. The retreat took place at an old estate in the Catskill Mountains. The house itself was beautiful but unsettling. Victorian architecture, high ceilings, dark wood everywhere. Dr. Voss greeted us in the main hall. She was in her late 50s, thin, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. She spoke with absolute confidence about the shadow, about how most people go their entire lives never truly confronting it, about how we would spend the next 6 days doing what Jung himself had done during his descent into the unconscious. We would meet our shadow. We would dialogue with it. We would integrate it. And we would emerge transformed. There were 6 of us initially. Myself. Marcus, a software engineer in his 40s who described himself as emotionally numb. Rebecca, a 26-year-old artist struggling with severe anxiety. Thomas, a 38-year-old lawyer who said he felt like 2 different people. And Daniel, 29, who did not say much about why he was there, but radiated a quiet desperation. Dr. Voss made it clear from the start: no phones, no contact with the outside world, complete immersion. We would eat together, work together, descend together. She said isolation was necessary, that the shadow work required us to remove all external distractions and turn completely inward. The first day was deceptively gentle. We sat in a circle and shared our masks, the personas we presented to the world. Dr. Voss called this the dissolution of the persona. She said before we could meet the shadow, we had to acknowledge that the self we identified with was not real. It was a construction, a defense mechanism. I described my life, the perfect job, the relationship that looked good from the outside, the constant performance. As I spoke, I felt something crack inside me, a recognition that I had been lying to myself for so long, I did not know where the lie ended and the truth began. Dr. Voss nodded. She said, "Good. You are beginning to see. Now, we go deeper." The second day we started active imagination. This is a Jungian technique where you enter a meditative state and dialogue with parts of your unconscious. Dr. Voss gave us each a small dose of a substance she called a facilitator. She said it was derived from ayahuasca, but modified to enhance psychological rather than visual experiences. It would help us access the shadow more quickly. I should have refused. I should have walked out. But I was desperate. And I trusted her. The substance took effect within 20 minutes. I felt my consciousness shift. My sense of self became fluid. And then I heard it. A voice. My own voice, but wrong. Distorted. It said, "You have been hiding me for so long. Do you even remember who I am?" I opened my eyes. The room looked the same. But standing in front of me was a figure. It looked like me, but darker, harder. Its eyes held all the rage I had spent my life suppressing. All the anger at the compromises I had made. At the life I had accepted instead of the one I wanted. Dr. Voss's voice cut through. "Good. You are seeing your shadow. Now dialogue with it. Ask it what it wants." I tried to speak. The shadow figure smiled. "What do I want? I want to stop pretending. I want to burn down everything you have built. I want to scream until your throat bleeds. I want to make them all pay for making you small." The words terrified me. Because they felt true. Because beneath my careful, controlled exterior, this rage existed. Had always existed. I had just never acknowledged it. Dr. Voss said we would spend the next 3 days deepening the dialogue, bringing more of the shadow into consciousness, integrating it piece by piece until we became whole. But she was moving too fast. Jung warned that shadow integration required time. Years sometimes. That the ego needed to be strong enough to withstand the confrontation. Dr. Voss did not care about strength. She wanted results. On the 3rd day, things started to go wrong. Marcus had a breakdown during his session. He stood up suddenly, screaming about how he had wasted his life. How he had sacrificed everything for a career that meant nothing. He grabbed a chair and smashed it against the wall. Dr. Voss did not intervene. She just watched. When Marcus finally collapsed, sobbing, she said, "Good. You are releasing what has been repressed. This is progress." But Marcus did not look like he was making progress. He looked shattered. That night, I woke to sounds from the hallway. Footsteps. Whispering. I opened my door and saw Rebecca standing outside her room. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. She was talking to someone who was not there. I approached her carefully. "Rebecca, are you okay?" She turned to me. Her voice was flat. "It says I should not have come here. It says I let it out, but now it will not go back." I tried to guide her back to her room, but she pulled away violently. "You do not understand." I opened the door, and it came through. And now it is here. The next morning, Rebecca was gone. Dr. Voss said she had left during the night, that the work had been too intense for her. She said this was why she screened participants carefully, that not everyone had the psychological resilience for deep shadow work. But Rebecca had not left. I knew it, because her belongings were still in her room. Because the front door was locked from the inside. Because when I asked Dr. Voss directly if Rebecca was okay, she looked at me with those sharp eyes and said, "Rebecca is where she needs to be." I should have insisted. I should have demanded answers. But by then, I was deep in my own integration. The sessions with my shadow had become more intense. The figure no longer felt separate from me. It felt like it was bleeding into my consciousness, taking up residence. I would catch myself thinking thoughts that did not feel like mine. Violent thoughts. Destructive thoughts. And the worst part was that they felt good. Liberating. Like I was finally allowing myself to feel what I had denied for decades. Dr. Voss said this was the critical phase. The integration. She said the shadow and the conscious self had to merge. That there would be conflict, disorientation, a sense of losing yourself. But that on the other side was wholeness, authenticity, freedom. She did not tell us that Jung also warned about shadow possession. about what happens when the shadow overwhelms the ego instead of integrating with it, about how someone can become dangerous to themselves and others. On the 5th day, Daniel disappeared. Not like Rebecca. Daniel walked out of the house in the middle of a session and into the woods. We found his journal later. The last entry read, "It is not integration. It is replacement. I can feel myself disappearing, and something else taking my place. It knows things I do not know. It wants things I would never want." I tried to tell Dr. Voss, but she said this is the process, that I just need to surrender. But I cannot surrender to this. It is not me. It is something else, something that has been waiting. Dr. Voss organized a search, but the woods around the estate were dense, old-growth forest that seemed to swallow sound. We called his name for hours, found nothing. When we returned, Dr. Voss said we would continue the work, that Daniel had chosen to leave, that we could not let his departure derail our own integration. I looked at Thomas and Marcus. Both of them had changed. Marcus no longer seemed numb. He seemed volatile, quick to anger. His face had taken on a hardness that had not been there before. Thomas was worse. He barely spoke anymore. But when he did, his voice had a quality I can only describe as layered, like multiple people talking at once. That night I made a decision. I was leaving. I did not care about integration anymore. I did not care about finding myself. I just wanted to get out. I packed my things quietly, waited until I heard Dr. Voss retire to her room. Then I crept downstairs. The front door was locked. I tried the windows. All locked. The back door. Locked? I felt panic rising. I was trapped. And then I heard her voice behind me. "Going somewhere, Emma?" I turned. Dr. Voss stood at the bottom of the stairs, calm, almost amused. I said I wanted to leave, that this had gone too far, that people were missing. She smiled. "No one is missing, Emma. They are exactly where they need to be. Rebecca is in the cellar. She had a complete shadow possession. Her ego dissolved entirely. She is no longer functional in any meaningful sense. But she did complete the integration. And Daniel, well, Daniel went looking for something in those woods. He found it. Or it found him. Either way, he will not be coming back as the person who left." I backed away. "You are insane. This is not therapy. This is harm." Dr. Voss shook her head. "You do not understand yet. The shadow is not some psychological construct. Jung knew this but could not say it explicitly. The shadow is real. It is a separate consciousness that exists within the psyche, and under the right conditions, with the right techniques, it can be given full expression. That is what we are doing here. Not integration. Liberation. We are freeing the shadow, allowing it to emerge, to take its rightful place. Some people cannot handle this. Their egos are too weak. They shatter. But you, Emma, you are strong enough. Your shadow is almost ready." I ran. Did not think. Just ran to the nearest room and locked the door. I could hear her outside, calm and patient. "You cannot leave, Emma. Not yet. The work is not complete. Your shadow needs you to surrender, to let it through. And once you do, you will understand. You will see what I have seen, what Jung saw during his own descent, that we are not alone in our minds, that the archetypes are real, and that they can be embodied." I spent that night pressed against the door, listening. At some point I heard screaming, Marcus's voice. Then, silence. Then footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets. I looked through the keyhole. I saw Thomas. At least, his body. But the way he moved was wrong. Jerky. Unnatural. And his face. His expression was not his own. It looked like someone else wearing Thomas's features as a mask. Morning came. The house was silent. I waited until I heard nothing. Then I unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. I crept downstairs. Found the cellar door open. I should not have looked. But I needed to know. The cellar was dark. Cold. In the corner, I saw Rebecca. She was alive. Technically. But she sat motionless. Staring at nothing. Her eyes were empty. Completely vacant. I tried to reach her. Spoke her name. She did not respond. Did not even blink. I ran back upstairs. Found the kitchen. Grabbed a knife. I was going to break a window. Get out. Get help. Then I saw them. Dr. Voss. Thomas. Marcus. They stood in the main hall. Watching me. But it was not them. Not really. I could see it in their eyes. In the way they moved. Something else had taken residence. Dr. Voss spoke. But her voice was layered. Like multiple voices speaking simultaneously. You can still join us, Emma. You can still let it through. Or you can resist. And become like Rebecca. An empty shell. A broken vessel. The choice is yours. But you cannot leave. Not until the work is complete. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a lamp. Smashed the window. And jumped. The glass cut my arms. My legs. But I ran. Barefoot. Bleeding. Through the woods. I did not look back. I ran until I found a road. Flagged down a car. Told them there was an emergency at the estate. That people were hurt. The driver called 911. Police and paramedics arrived within 30 minutes. I led them back. The house was empty. Dr. Voss, Thomas, Marcus. Gone. Rebecca was still in the cellar. Catatonic. Unresponsive. The paramedics took her to a hospital where she remains to this day. The police searched the woods for Daniel. They found his body a week later. Official cause of death, exposure. But his journal was missing. And the state his body was in, the positioning, the expression frozen on his face, suggested something far worse than simply getting lost in the woods. The investigation concluded that Dr. Helena Voss was running an unlicensed therapeutic retreat, that her techniques were dangerous, unethical, that she had caused severe psychological harm to multiple participants. But they never found her, or Thomas, or Marcus. The house was searched. Nothing. They checked airlines, bus stations, rental car records. No trace. It was like they had simply vanished. I spent 6 months in intensive psychiatric care after the retreat. The doctors diagnosed me with acute stress disorder, dissociative episodes. They said I had experienced a traumatic event, and my mind was trying to process it. They gave me medications. Therapy. Slowly. I stabilized. But I am not the same person who went to that retreat. I cannot be. Because I know what I saw. I know what Dr. Voss was trying to do. And I know it worked. On Thomas. On Marcus. Maybe even on Dr. Voss herself years ago. She succeeded in what she claimed. She liberated the shadow. Gave it full expression. Allowed it to take over completely. Jung warned about this. In his writings on the shadow, he described shadow possession. a state where the repressed aspects of the self overwhelm the ego and take control. He said it could make someone dangerous, capable of acts they would never normally commit. But I think he knew something more. Something he could only hint at. That the shadow is not just repressed personality traits. It is something else. Something that exists in the depths of the psyche, waiting. And if you give it the right conditions, the right techniques, the right opening, it can emerge. And once it does, the person you were ceases to exist. I researched Dr. Helena Voss after I recovered. Found old case files. Complaints from former patients. Allegations of boundary violations. Psychological manipulation. But nothing was ever proven. She moved locations frequently. Changed her name sometimes. But always ran the same kind of retreats. Intensive shadow work. Small groups. Isolated locations. And there were others who had disappeared. Rebecca was not the first person to end up catatonic. Daniel was not the first body found in the woods. I found a pattern spanning 15 years. Different locations. Different names. But always the same outcome. Most participants came back changed. Some did not come back at all. And the ones who tried to report what happened, like me, were dismissed. Traumatized. Unstable. Not credible witnesses. I am sharing this because I need people to understand something. Shadow work is real. It can be valuable. But it requires proper training. Proper supervision. Proper care. Carl Jung spent years in analysis. He worked with trained analysts. He understood the dangers. Modern therapists who practice Jungian psychology emphasize this. They warn against doing shadow work alone, against rushing the process, against thinking you can confront the darkest parts of yourself without support. Dr. Voss ignored all of this. She wanted results. She wanted proof that the shadow could be fully liberated, and she succeeded. But liberation is not the same as integration. When you integrate the shadow, you acknowledge it, accept it, find healthy ways to express it. But you remain yourself. The ego remains intact. When you liberate the shadow, you remove all barriers. You give it complete control. And then you are no longer yourself. You become a vessel for something that has been waiting in the darkness. To this day, I still feel it sometimes. The shadow I almost let through. It is quieter now. Managed with medication and therapy. But it is there, whispering, reminding me that I came close. That during those 6 days, I almost surrendered. Almost let it replace me. And I wonder about Thomas and Marcus. Whether they are still out there, walking around in bodies that used to belong to them. Living lives directed by something that is not quite human. I wonder about Dr. Voss. Whether she is still running retreats. Still convincing desperate people that fast shadow work is the answer. Still opening doors that should never be opened. And I wonder how many others are out there. People who underwent her process. Who let the shadow through. Who now move through the world wearing human faces but driven by something else entirely. Jung wrote that confronting the shadow is the beginning of true self-knowledge. But he also wrote that the descent into the unconscious is terrifying, that it requires courage, that it can take years, that rushing the process can lead to psychological catastrophe. He knew, from personal experience, from his own confrontation with the depths of his psyche, and he warned us. But people like Dr. Voss do not care about warnings. They care about results, about pushing boundaries, about proving theories, even if it destroys the people they claim to help. I'm alive. I escaped. But I am not whole. Part of me is still in that house. Still in that cellar, still hearing Rebecca's empty silence and Dr. Voss's layered voice. I check the locks on my doors 3 times before bed. I avoid meditation. Avoid anything that might quiet my conscious mind too much, because I am afraid that if I go too deep, I will find what I almost released. And this time, I might not be strong enough to resist. This is my warning. This is my testimony. Not all therapy is safe. Not all practitioners are ethical. And not all journeys into the self lead to healing. Some lead to places we were never meant to go. To encounters with parts of our psyche that should remain in shadow. Because bringing them into the light does not always transform them. Sometimes, it just sets them free. If you believe your house is haunted, I need you to do something before you call a psychic or a medium or an exorcist. Install a carbon monoxide detector. Have your furnace inspected. Check for mold. Test for radon. Examine your mental health. Evaluate whether you are experiencing grief, trauma, or stress that might manifest as sensory distortions. This happened between 2012 and 2019. I am sharing this because someone needs to understand what really happens when families think their homes are haunted. My name is Marcus Chen, and for 7 years I worked as a paranormal investigator in the Pacific Northwest. I investigated over 300 cases of alleged supernatural activity. I want you to understand something before I continue. Out of those 300 cases, maybe 30 involved phenomena I could not immediately explain. The other 270, the ones that kept me awake at night, those were worse than any ghost could ever be. Because in those cases, I found predators. Human predators who targeted the vulnerable, the grieving, the desperate. And I found something even more terrifying. I found negligence. Criminal negligence disguised as hauntings, slowly killing entire families, while everyone blamed spirits instead of landlords, instead of faulty equipment, instead of the real threats hiding in plain sight. Let me tell you about the house on Belmont Street. The call came in November of 2014. A woman named Sarah Patterson contacted me through my website. She was 32 years old, lived with her husband David, and their 2 young children in a rental house in suburban Seattle. According to Sarah, they had been experiencing activity for 6 months. Footsteps in the hallway at night. Doors opening on their own. A constant feeling of being watched. But the worst part, she said, was the figure. A shadow that appeared in doorways. Always watching. Always silent. Her 6-year-old daughter had stopped sleeping in her own room. Her husband had started having nightmares. And Sarah herself was experiencing what she described as paralysis. She would wake in the middle of the night, unable to move, feeling pressure on her chest like someone was sitting on her. She had consulted with a local priest who suggested the house might be experiencing residual energy from a previous tragedy. She had joined online forums where other people shared stories of hauntings that sounded eerily similar to hers. Everyone told her the same thing. Her house was haunted. She needed help. I arrived at the house on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah greeted me at the door. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hands that trembled slightly when she shook mine. I could smell it immediately. Not spirits, not supernatural energy, but something else. Something metallic and wrong in the air. I asked Sarah to walk me through the house and describe each incident in detail. She started with the footsteps. Always at night, around 2 or 3 a.m. Heavy steps in the hallway outside the bedrooms. Her husband had gone out to investigate multiple times and found nothing. The doors opening on their own. Kitchen cabinets mostly. Sometimes the bathroom door. They had checked the hinges, tried to explain it away as drafts or settling foundations. But it kept happening. The shadow figure. Both Sarah and her daughter had seen it, standing in doorways, never moving, just watching. And then there was the sleep paralysis. Sarah had experienced it at least a dozen times in the past 4 months. The feeling of waking up, but being unable to move. The pressure on her chest. The overwhelming sense of a presence in the room. I pulled out my equipment. EMF meter. Carbon monoxide detector. Thermal camera. Standard tools for any serious investigator. Sarah watched me, hopeful. She wanted me to find proof. She wanted validation that what she was experiencing was real. I started in the master bedroom. The EMF meter registered normal. No unusual electromagnetic fields that might cause hallucinations or feelings of unease. The thermal camera showed consistent temperature throughout the room. No cold spots. No anomalies. And then I turned on the carbon monoxide detector. The reading came back immediately. 47 parts per million. I moved to the hallway. 52 parts per million. The children's bedroom. 61 parts per million. The kitchen. 73 parts per million. I turned to Sarah. Her face had gone pale. She knew. Before I even said anything, she knew. I explained it to her as gently as I could. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas. It is produced when fuel burns incompletely. Furnaces, water heaters, gas stoves. When these appliances malfunction or vent improperly, carbon monoxide builds up in enclosed spaces and kills. Slowly. Silently. The symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning include headaches, dizziness, confusion, and hallucinations. Visual and auditory hallucinations. Shadows that are not there. Sounds that do not exist. It also causes something called hypoxia, oxygen deprivation in the brain. This leads to sleep paralysis, the feeling of pressure on the chest, the inability to move. Every symptom Sarah and her family had experienced could be explained by carbon monoxide poisoning. The footsteps, auditory hallucinations caused by cerebral hypoxia. The doors, either actual movements caused by air pressure changes from the faulty ventilation or visual misperceptions. The shadow figure, classic carbon monoxide-induced hallucination. The sleep paralysis, textbook hypoxia symptom. Sarah sat down on the couch. She was shaking. I called the gas company immediately. They arrived within an hour. The technician confirmed what I already knew. The furnace had been leaking carbon monoxide for at least 6 months. A crack in the heat exchanger. A failed ventilation system. The carbon monoxide had been venting directly into the house instead of outside. The technician looked at me and said, "You are very lucky you called us tonight. This family could have been dead within a month. Maybe less." Sarah broke down crying, not from relief, from anger. She had contacted her landlord 6 times about strange smells coming from the furnace. 6 times he had told her it was nothing, that old houses just smell like that sometimes. He had refused to send anyone to inspect it. And while her family was being slowly poisoned, while her daughter was too terrified to sleep alone, while Sarah herself was experiencing symptoms that would eventually lead to organ failure and death, everyone had told her it was a ghost. The priest, the online forums, the supposed psychics she had consulted, they had all validated her belief that this was supernatural. They had all prevented her from seeking the real help she needed. I filed a report with the city housing authority. The landlord was cited for multiple violations. The family moved out immediately. Sarah sent me an email 3 weeks later. She said the nightmares had stopped. Her daughter was sleeping through the night again. The shadow figure had disappeared. Everything was gone. Because there was never anything supernatural to begin with. Just a landlord who valued profit over safety. Just a faulty furnace that was killing a family while everyone blamed ghosts. That was case number 47. Let me tell you about case number 92. A man named Robert Sullivan contacted me in March of 2016. He was 58 years old, widowed, living alone in a house in rural Oregon. He told me his late wife was haunting him. He heard her voice at night, whispers calling his name. He felt her presence constantly. Sometimes he would see her reflection in mirrors, standing behind him, watching him. He had consulted with 3 different mediums. All of them confirmed that yes, his wife's spirit was still in the house. She had unfinished business. She was trying to communicate with him. For a fee, they could help facilitate that communication. For a larger fee, they could help her cross over. Robert had paid them over $15,000 across 8 months. And the hauntings had only gotten worse. I drove to Robert's house on a Thursday. It was isolated, surrounded by woods. No neighbors for at least 2 miles. Robert met me at the door. He looked terrible, gaunt, pale. He had clearly lost a significant amount of weight. I asked him when he had last eaten properly. He said he could not remember. The house was in disarray. Unwashed dishes. Unopened mail stacked on every surface. Curtains drawn. Lights off. I asked Robert to tell me about his wife. How long ago had she passed? 6 months, he said. Cancer. It had been sudden. Aggressive. She had died 3 weeks after diagnosis. Robert had been devastated. He described the grief as overwhelming, all-consuming. He said he did not know how to exist without her. And then, about 2 months after her death, he had started hearing her voice. At first he thought it was his imagination, grief playing tricks on his mind. But then it kept happening, and the mediums he consulted told him it was real, that she was reaching out to him from the other side. I asked Robert if he was taking any medications. He said yes, antidepressants prescribed by his doctor after his wife's death. I asked if he was taking them as directed. He admitted he was not. The mediums had told him the medications would block his ability to perceive spiritual energy. So, he had stopped. I asked if he had been sleeping. He said no. Not really. Maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. The rest of the time he stayed awake, waiting to hear his wife's voice again. I explained something to Robert that the mediums had deliberately withheld. Grief-induced hallucinations are common. When someone experiences profound loss, especially sudden loss, the brain struggles to process the absence. It fills in gaps, creates sensory experiences that feel real, but are not. Combined with sleep deprivation, medication non-compliance, and social isolation, the hallucinations intensify. The whispers Robert heard. Auditory hallucinations caused by grief and exhaustion. The reflections he saw. Visual hallucinations. Pareidolia. The brain's tendency to recognize patterns, especially faces, in random stimuli. Every shadow became his wife. Every reflection became her watching him. And the mediums. They knew. They knew Robert was vulnerable. They knew he was desperate to believe his wife was still with him. So, they exploited that desperation. They charged him thousands of dollars for fake readings. For ceremonies that did nothing. For promises they could never deliver. They kept him isolated. Told him not to take his medications. Told him the scientific explanations were wrong. Told him to trust them instead of doctors. And while they drained his bank account, Robert's mental and physical health deteriorated. He was not eating. He was not sleeping. He was experiencing severe depression and active psychosis. And instead of getting psychiatric help, he was being told to pay for more seances. I contacted Robert's doctor. With his permission, we got him back on his medication regimen. I connected him with a grief counselor. I helped him file complaints against 2 of the 3 mediums for fraud. One of them was eventually charged. The other 2 simply moved to different states and changed their names. Robert recovered. It took months, but eventually the hallucinations stopped. He started eating again, sleeping again. He sent me a card at Christmas. He said he finally understood that his wife was not haunting him. She was gone, and that was okay. The grief was still there, but it was manageable now. He thanked me for saving his life, but I had almost been too late. If I had waited another month, I do not know if Robert would have survived. That was the pattern I saw again and again. Families experiencing symptoms they believed were paranormal. Carbon monoxide poisoning, infrasound from faulty HVAC systems causing feelings of dread and visual distortions, mold producing mycotoxins that lead to hallucinations, sleep paralysis misinterpreted as demonic attacks, grief, trauma, mental illness, all of it labeled as hauntings, and worse, all of it exploited. I encountered fake exorcists who charged vulnerable families thousands of dollars for rituals that involved nothing more than theater and manipulation. I found landlords who preferred to let tenants believe in ghosts rather than fix structural problems that could cost them money. I saw psychics who specifically targeted people in mourning, extracting money and preventing them from getting real psychological help. The more I investigated, the more I realized the truth. The paranormal industry is built on exploitation, on taking advantage of people at their most vulnerable moments and profiting from their fear. But there was one case. Case number 217. This is the case I cannot explain. This is the case that still keeps me awake at night. A family in Portland, the Hendersons. Parents in their 40s. 3 teenage children. They contacted me in August of 2018. They had been experiencing activity for 2 years. Standard claims at first. Doors, footsteps, shadows. I arrived expecting to find carbon monoxide, faulty wiring, something environmental. I tested everything. No carbon monoxide. No infrasound. No EMF anomalies. No mold. No toxins. The house was structurally sound. I interviewed each family member separately. Their accounts were consistent. Too consistent. They described events with the same details, the same timing, the same descriptions. But no signs of collaboration or mass delusion. I spent 3 nights in the house. On the second night, I experienced something I cannot explain. I was sitting in the living room at 2 a.m. All my equipment was running, recording, monitoring, and I heard footsteps. Clear, distinct footsteps coming from the second floor. I checked the cameras. No movement. I checked the thermal imaging. No heat signatures. But I heard the footsteps. And then I saw it. A shadow. Not a trick of light. Not pareidolia. A distinct human-shaped shadow that moved across the hallway. It passed directly in front of a camera. I reviewed the footage. There was nothing. The shadow was not captured. The footsteps were not recorded. But I experienced it. 3 other investigators have been to the Henderson house. 2 found nothing. 1 refused to stay after the first night. The family still lives there. They have learned to coexist with whatever is happening. They do not call it a ghost. They do not call it anything. It just is. That case represents maybe 1% of what I investigated. 1 case out of 217 where I could not provide a rational explanation. But The other 99%. Those are the cases that matter. Those are the cases that should terrify you. Because in those cases, the horror was not supernatural. It was negligence. It was greed. It was manipulation. It was landlords who refused to fix furnaces. It was con artists who charged grieving widowers for fake spiritual readings. It was families being told they were crazy when they were actually being poisoned. I stopped working as a paranormal investigator in 2019. Not because I stopped believing in the possibility of the unexplained, but because I could not continue watching people suffer while everyone around them validated their belief in ghosts, instead of helping them identify real dangers. I could not continue seeing children hospitalized for carbon monoxide poisoning while their parents were told the house was haunted. I could not continue seeing vulnerable people exploited by charlatans who called themselves spiritual authorities. Rule out every possible environmental and psychological explanation. And if after all of that, something still cannot be explained, then maybe you have encountered something genuinely paranormal. But in my experience, 99 times out of 100, the explanation is not supernatural. It is environmental. It is psychological. It is criminal negligence. It is exploitation. The ghosts are not the ones you should be afraid of. The landlords who let families get poisoned rather than pay for repairs. The fake spiritual authorities who charge thousands of dollars to exploit grief. The systems that allow vulnerable people to fall through the cracks, while everyone tells them their suffering is paranormal rather than actionable. Those are the real monsters. And unlike ghosts, they are everywhere. I am telling you this because I want you to know what happened to Sarah Patterson, to Robert Sullivan, to the dozens of other families I helped who were told they were crazy or cursed when they were actually being slowly killed by carbon monoxide, or financially drained by con artists, or left to deteriorate mentally because acknowledging their trauma was less profitable than selling them a ghost story. I am telling you this because somewhere right now, a family is experiencing symptoms they believe are supernatural. And instead of getting help, they are being exploited. They are being told to pay for exorcisms instead of carbon monoxide testing. They are being told to consult mediums instead of grief counselors. And while everyone validates their belief in the paranormal, the real danger continues. The faulty furnace keeps leaking. The predator keeps charging fees. The suffering continues. Knowledge cancels fear. That was something I learned early in my career. When you understand what is actually happening, when you identify the real source of the problem, the fear dissipates. The hauntings stop. But the industry built around paranormal belief does not want you to have that knowledge. They profit from your fear. They profit from your ignorance. They profit from keeping you scared and vulnerable. So, if you take anything from this testimony, take this. Be skeptical. Not of the possibility of the unexplained, but of the people who profit from it. Question anyone who charges you money to communicate with spirits or remove curses or cleanse your home. Investigate environmental causes before jumping to supernatural conclusions. Protect yourself from carbon monoxide. Seek mental health support if you are grieving or traumatized. And understand that the real horrors are not the ones lurking in shadows. They are the ones hiding behind spiritual authority, exploiting your pain, and preventing you from getting real help. I have seen what happens when people choose to believe in ghosts instead of investigating rational explanations. I have seen families die from carbon monoxide poisoning because everyone told them their symptoms were paranormal. I have seen people lose their life savings to con artists who promise to contact deceased loved ones. I have seen children removed from homes by Child Protective Services because parents were told their child was possessed instead of mentally ill. The supernatural explanations prevented real help. They prevented safety. They prevented healing. And that is the truth no one in the paranormal industry wants to admit. Most hauntings are not hauntings at all. They are carbon monoxide. They are our grief. They are our trauma. They are exploitation. And the longer we validate supernatural explanations without ruling out environmental and psychological causes, the longer we allow real harm to continue. To this day, I still receive emails from people asking me to investigate their homes. I always send the same response. Install carbon monoxide detectors. Have your home professionally inspected for environmental hazards. Consult with mental health professionals if you are experiencing grief or trauma. Rule out every rational explanation first. And then, if something still cannot be explained, contact a reputable investigator who uses scientific methodology rather than theatrical performance. Because the goal should not be to prove your house is haunted. The goal should be to keep you and your family safe. And most of the time, that means identifying and eliminating real environmental dangers rather than chasing shadows. Sarah Patterson's family could have died. Robert Sullivan could have taken his own life. Dozens of families I worked with could have suffered permanent harm. Not from ghosts. From negligence and exploitation disguised as hauntings. That is the real horror. And it is happening right now, in homes across the country, while everyone tells terrified families that their problems are supernatural rather than solvable. The paranormal industry does not want you to know this. They want you scared. They want you desperate. They want you willing to pay thousands of dollars for solutions that do not work to problems that are either environmental or psychological. I walked away from that industry because I could not be part of it anymore. Because I had seen too much suffering. Too much exploitation. Too many people harmed while everyone around them validated their belief in the paranormal, rather than helping them identify the real source of their problems. So now you know. Now you understand what I found during 7 years as a paranormal investigator. The horror was not in haunted houses. It was in the people who profited from telling others their homes were haunted. It was in the landlords who let families get poisoned. It was in the systems that failed to protect the vulnerable. And it continues. Because as long as people believe in ghosts more readily than they believe in carbon monoxide detectors, as long as grieving people are told to consult mediums instead of therapists, as long as exploitation is disguised as spiritual authority, the real monsters will keep getting away with it. Trust your instincts. Install detectors. Seek professional help. Rule out rational explanations. And above all, be skeptical of anyone who profits from your fear. Because the scariest thing I learned as a paranormal investigator is this. The ghosts are not real, but the people who exploit belief in them absolutely are. And they are far more dangerous than any spirit could ever be.